Wow.
And we will be getting them out somehow. So I'm sure we're just going to be, got to be careful. We know how.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, the windy part.
We'll be getting started in just 1 minute. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our oversight hearing with the Department of Transportation. We have traditionally had these oversight hearings as a way for committee members to familiarize themselves with all things transportation in the state of Connecticut. But it's also really great for returning members and for the chairs of the committee to check in with the commissioner and the department and what they're seeing in terms of rail, busing, new projects. It's just a good way for us to sort of keep a pulse on what's going on. And there is always a lot going on in transportation. So I will welcome the commissioner in just 1 minute, but I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair for any opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to everybody who's here and everybody who's online. I just want to reiterate how important well, I wouldn't have known what was going on in transportation if it weren't for these kinds of things when I first joined the committee. So to all of the new members of the committee, I implore you to ignore all the other important things that you're doing and focus here. It's truly informational and really gave me a great foundation for understanding what our job was and what were meant to be responsible for. So thank you very much, Madam Chair. I will let you continue with your introductions.
Thanks so much. And I know committee members are going to be in and out today. We do all recognize how important this is. It's obviously recorded, so folks will be able to see this online as well. And I think our ranking members are also probably tied up and going to be in and out. So I will not turn it over to them right now. With that, I will welcome Commissioner Eucalito. Thanks so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. So, um, I do have a presentation, which I'll run through and then save plenty of time for questions, and other issues that you want to discuss. And I do want to introduce my team members who are here. If they get called up to answer questions, I will also, they know to introduce themselves the first time they speak. So I have Ben Limmer, the Bureau Chief of Public Transportation, Paul Rizzo, the Bureau Chief of Highway Operations, Kim Lassay is our Bureau Chief of Policy and Planning, Jim Fallon is our new Chief Engineer, and Gary Pesca-Solido is our Bureau Chief of Finance Administration. I think most of you should know Phil Miniero, who is our Director of Legislative Affairs, and then Joe Cooper from our Communications Office as well. So diving right in, this is the topics I want to cover today, focusing on what is our agency, discuss some highlights from last year, safety, our capital program, the roadway and bridge program, the public transportation program, touch on some mega projects, which will be a focus of the state for the next probably 30 years or so, and then talk about funding and then wrap up. So this is our 130th birthday this year. We are one of the older state agencies. It actually, the Good Roads movement was established back when we used to have dirt roads across the country. And back 130 years ago, 135 years ago, there were bikers across the country who wanted paved roads so they could ride their bicycles on roads. That's how the Good Roads movement started. Connecticut's legislature created the Highway Commission and appointed a commissioner to oversee that effort to build paved roads in this country. That's where we ended up to today. So we went through an effort to kind of rebrand ourselves a little bit. As we were approaching 130 years, we wanted to take a look at what do we represent, who are we as an organization. We changed our mission statement to simply improving lives through transportation. It's simple and it's to the point. We impact everyone in the state every single day. Whether you use the roads or not, you're probably using something in your household that was transported via the roads in some form or another. We also established a vision statement to create a positive experience for people that optimizes mobility, supports economic vitality, and recognizes the impact of infrastructure development on the public and the environment. So 2024 recap, I wanted to highlight one issue that consistently is brought up about staffing at the DOT. We are authorized to have 3,567 employees. Through the retirements we had in 2022 up to today, we cycled through about a third of our employees are new within the past year and a half. Our HR team and our supervisors and managers hired 1,032 employees from July of 22 to December of 24. And so it's a huge new shift in our organization, and we continue to put out more work, even with all those new employees who are continuing to be trained. Our capital program that we just released last month is valued at $16.27 billion for the next 5 years. And we paved last year 818 lane miles through our programs to resurface the roadways. Working through the support of the legislature, we have installed so far 137 wrong-way detection systems. This is surpassing the legislative mandate that we were given. And so our team is really proud about that. 446.5 miles of guide rail and 4,539 miles of pavement markings. So touched on the staffing numbers, but as you can see, we are a very broad organization in that we do a lot of different things. And when we talk to people, they're really surprised that we have lawyers, we have archaeologists, we have highway maintainers, we have accountants, and we have environmental specialists, we have engineers, designers, planners. Basically, if you can think of a job, we're probably doing it at the DOT. And so we continue to try and spread the message about what a great place it is to come work at DOT. And we're constantly at job fairs and recruitment opportunities. We also have been working to deliver on the various reports that have been provided, asked of us through legislative process. As you see on the screen there, those are the list of the reports that we've submitted to you all the past few years at the top, and then as well as some other legislative mandated initiatives that we continue to work on consistently. So starting with roadway safety, because that safety really is the thing that we think about every single day when we wake up and when we go to sleep. It really was driven home to us at DOT and in state government when we lost 2 state employees last year due to impaired drivers. This is something that really hit us hard. And it's something that we continue to focus on, as you'll see in our legislative proposals. And in what we do every single day to try and protect the traveling public, as well as the state employees, as well as construction workers, tow operators, anyone who's working on the side of the roadway. I try to start every presentation with an update on where we are with statistics. So as of February 3rd, we had 27 fatalities on a roadway in 2025. You can see that it is approximately where we were the past several years at February 3rd of each preceding year. However, when you look at the charts to the right, you can see that 2024 was higher than average year. It wasn't as high as 2022, but it was still much higher than 2020, 2021, and 2023. We had 328 fatalities in last calendar year. The most concerning, though, was the pedestrian and motorcyclist numbers, which the motorcyclist fatality numbers were astronomical compared to what we've seen historically. And the pedestrian fatality numbers also were much higher than our average years. This chart shows a trend line of roadway fatalities in our state. We are going in the wrong direction. We are trying to bend the curve to go to 0. That's what we've been mandated to do, and it's going the opposite direction. Wrong way fatal crashes. This also, we've seen an uptick, not just in 2022, but also in 2024 as well. So as I touched on, the wrong way detection system, we have 137 locations that are currently active. What these are doing is that it does, if it's activated by what it determines to be a vehicle going the wrong direction, it will notify our Highway Operations Center. There's one in Newington and one in Bridgeport, as well as notify the local troop for the state police. So more than, these have been activated more than 230 times by drivers. There have been, birds sometimes set them off, but 230 drivers have set them off. And the vast majority of them have self-corrected when they've the floodlight comes on, the flashing light comes on. Our team notices, because we get an alert, we see the video of it, that most of the people are self-correcting themselves because of these systems. And we have another over 200 plus planned to be installed in the coming years. Thankfully, we've been provided that funding through the legislature and the governor and the bond commission. We also have the work zone camera pilot program. This was something that was a pilot. We ran the pilot on several construction work zone sites across the state. It was wildly successful. It reduced speeds by up to 18%. Because there was first we issued warnings, and then you got a fine for a second violation, an increased fine for a third violation. We saw over 25,000 warnings were issued, but only 750 fines. So that, the recidivism rate there was extremely low, where people got their warning. There was a time gap between when the warning was issued and when they would trigger another fine. And most people travel the same route most days. So that meant that people got the warning and then they paid attention the next time they saw those signs that there were speed cameras out there. This is something that was in our report we sent to the legislature, showing those speed curves and how impactful the cameras were in reducing those average speeds. This was at a project site in Norwalk. Because of that success, when we transmitted the report, we did get approval from this committee and the full legislature and the governor to make it a permanent program. We are in the process of standing that up now with the goal of having it in place this summer. There were some changes based on our report that was submitted where we recommended lowering the threshold, which was 15 miles per hour over the speed limit. That is across the country the highest we've seen. So we went to 10 miles per hour over the speed limit threshold. That's the average across the country. We are providing notice to towns before we activate any cameras for that project. We also are going to have additional locations, and we are planning to do in maintenance work zones where a lot of our workers are working on the side of the road as well. We also are doing things through our traffic incident management program where we're training our employees as well as first responders across the state. So you see on the screen, we've trained over 5,900 first responders on how to do effective traffic incident management, how to protect themselves when they're on the side of the road and avoid secondary crashes. We are using new technology. On the top right corner are things called pilots. Those are electronic flares that last a long time instead of 10, 15 minutes. A regular flare that you would put on the side of the road does. It also protects our employees because it sends an alert to Waze or other mapping systems to alert people when those are out there that there's a incident ahead or work zone ahead. We also have light up vests, and we also on the bottom right, it's using invisible spectrum light to illuminate the high visibility vests. We are buying new truck mounted attenuator packages. So not just having the crash trucks out there, which we get crashes every couple days. One of our crash trucks is crashed into by a driver. But it's now having cameras on it as well as that will be able to monitor the speed of the driver. It's not used for ticketing. It just tells people your speed is this. So that's what you see on the screen. So because it's been proven in every study that's been completed that anytime a driver sees those signs saying your speed is this, whether it's on the side of the road or in a crash truck, instinctually drivers will slow down. So we're deploying that in every work zone we can as we buy more packages. We're also testing something called Zone Command, where it will monitor if a driver comes into a pre-mapped zone of a work zone and they don't have time to get out of that work zone before hitting a truck or workers, it will sound an alert to the workers in front of the truck as well as to the driver approaching the vehicle and flash. And lastly, the layout vehicle is for striping. So this is an opportunity for us to get our workers out of the envelope of the roadway into a vehicle where it will go and use GIS mapping to mark where pavement marking should go. And then when the machine comes out after that and does the marking itself, it will basically avoid our employees having to be out there and hand mark where the marking should go. The vehicle will do it electronically. Another safety measure that the legislature adopted was allowing municipalities to have automated traffic enforcement safety devices or safety cameras, so both speed cameras and red light cameras. The program is up and running. Municipalities can apply. They have to apply to our Office of State Traffic Administration, which reviews and sees if the proposal is in conformity with the legislative act. And then OSTA, the traffic administrator, will approve or send it back for revisions. So far, only one has been approved, the town of Washington. We have received other submissions, though. We continue to use state and federal fund to raise awareness of safety issues, support law enforcement, and continue to do training. We are doing a lot of education about drug impaired driving. Doing green labs, which is training officers on how to detect impairment on someone who is high on marijuana. Also training law enforcement on how to become drug recognition experts, which is the highest level of training you can do to be trained to detect what drug someone is impaired by. We also are doing providing law enforcement with equipment to do breathalyzer equipment, other equipment for their vehicles. We're doing police phlebotomy training program as requested by prosecutors and law enforcement, as well as what's called a DRE call-out program. Because DRE training is so complicated and it's not for every officer, we don't expect every department across the entire state to have a DRE or multiple DREs. So what it is right now is we have around 70 DREs. There's one centralized call out that someone can call or text, and they'll reach an officer, and that officer will then send it out to all the DREs and see who can respond to that requesting law enforcement department. That way it reduces the burden off of all the departments across the state. Traffic enforcement. So we get this question a lot. So this is a graph showing traffic stops since 2019. As you can see, the drop in 2020, and there's been a slow increase since then. The 2024 data is slightly incomplete because this state police data from December and a few municipal departments is missing from December 2024 as well. So that will be slightly increased. And this is citations that were issued. So stepping back from traffic stops and looking at actual citations that were issued. As you can see, again, a significant drop in 2020 and then a slow increase since then. I think there's going to be a hearing in the next couple of weeks on some of our legislative proposals. So this just recaps what you'll be seeing before you. We'll have plenty of time to discuss that in those public hearings. Diving into our capital program. Many of you have seen this already, but the capital plan is a 5-year document that we publish every single year. And it is a public document. We share it with the legislature as well as do a public presentation on it. And it essentially, we spend 12 months preparing it. It involves public input. And it's the document in which we and the construction industry and the design industry across the state can plan for what work we are planning to do in the state DOT. It follows a federal fiscal year. So we identify projects, we drop into buckets based on category and scale and scope. We apply some metrics. We collect public feedback. We program the projects. So when we're at a point where we're ready to advance a project into design, we will basically figure out what funding stream it can fit into, and we'll assign federal funds to that project. And that's essentially called programming it. And we essentially kick off the process. And that's how a project becomes a project. It's like how a bill becomes a bill. Our chief engineer, he just stepped into the job a month ago now. He was assistant chief engineer before that, but he and I talked what our priorities are in our capital plan. And so you can see on the screen, it's a lot of what you would expect here in Connecticut. Safety is the top one. State of good repair. We have an aging infrastructure. Unlike states like Utah or Texas, we're not building new things. We're not building greenfields infrastructure. Everything we do is largely going back and repairing things we already built over the past 100 years or replacing it with new structures. But we're not going into where something is not developed and building a new highway because our state is essentially built out. And so largely what we do is state of good repair. And through that process, we try to address congestion, address travel times on public transportation, include active transportation, so bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And then we also have our major programs and initiatives, which are kind of a separate bucket because of the scale of them, which we are calling mega projects. This is just, again, showing how a project comes to fruition. It is a very long process. The federal government has a very detailed and delineated lengthy process to how to get a project from conception to reality. There's a lot of permitting that comes along with it. And so it's a lot of preaching patience to the public who think that we can just snap our fingers and build a project. But it's many years of design, many years of permitting, and then the construction. So when we get to the construction point, it's like a sigh of relief for a lot of us because the hardest part is usually the design and permitting. This is a public dashboard we have on our website where every project is available on a GIS map, both ones that are in design or what we call pre-construction, as well as ones that are in construction today, as well as any maintenance projects. Lot SIP is local projects that are state funded. So we have about 816 projects on our map today if you go there as of January 29th. And this shows our capital plan expenditures. So this is how much money is actually being paid out the door for capital projects. As you can see, we have increased significantly where we've been in the past. So we are at our highest level ever in our state's history in terms of actual expenditures for infrastructure. And so we are pretty excited to see that trend line continue up, given the extensive needs that have been identified year after year. So breaking down that capital program, roadway and bridge. So bridge projects, there are lots of major bridges that need repair across the state. We have done a great job in Connecticut through funding increases to address the condition of our bridges. We have brought it down to below, or I think around 6% of poor condition bridges, which doesn't mean they're unsafe. It just means that they're antiquated and need to be repaired. So some of the ones you see on the screen there, the Gold Star Bridge, the Haddam Swing Bridge, the Bulkley Bridge down the bottom. Those are some major bridges that are going to need a lot of work. And then we have major roadway projects, both interstates as well as the public believes are, they consider a local road, right? But it's a state route number that we are responsible for maintaining and rebuilding, as well as trail programs across the state. So if you go to East Lyme today, you'll see a major project underway, significant project actually elevating the highway and then lowering the highway. It's pretty impressive what we're doing out there. Many of you probably drive through 91.6, 91.15 interchange, which has long been a headache for anyone traveling through the center part of the state. That project is underway, will be completed by the end of this decade. And so we're excited to get that one untangled. As well as many other projects up and down the state. This is just a list of some other programs that we do every year across the state. Bridge and culverts, illumination, highway buildings, so the buildings that we use to maintain the highway, and traffic signals, pavement markings. We also have municipal projects, which I'll touch on in a second. As well as federally funded municipal projects, as well as grants that we use where we give state money to municipalities for work. And then we also have our engineering safety team. So they go out and they do a strategic highway safety plan, which is a federally mandated document, vulnerable road user assessment, which is also federally mandated, and the Highway Safety Improvement Program. All three of those are federal mandates that we do, and it helps us determine what projects we're going to do across the state. You see some of those improving centerline rumble strips, putting in road diets where we eliminate one general travel lane and put in a two-way left turn lane, twiddle, as we like to say in transportation speak. And then something that's become very popular are rapid rectangular flash beacons, RRFBs, and those are something that we continue to support municipalities on installing on their roadways where there's a crosswalk or a crossing in the middle of a roadway. So state support for municipalities, Town Aid Road Program. This is funding from the legislature from the budget each year that goes out $60 million a year to local governments. Broad eligible use, but we distribute it to them twice a year. We split it up into payments of 30, and it's based on a formula in statute. Community Connectivity Grant Program. To date, we've awarded $62 million to municipalities across the state. We just opened the new round of applications. That's due May 21st. So this is for anything that can improve connectivity or safety in a community focused on pedestrians, bikers, transit users. Transit Rural Improvement Program, or TRIP. This was a concept we brought to the legislature a couple of years ago. This is taking what we call the lot SIP program, which is basically a fund swap where we take federal funds, we use it for our state projects, and we give state money to local governments. It's focused at urbanized areas largely, so some of the rural areas are left out of that program. So this was meant to supplement that. And so we have done one round of awards. The next round of awards, the application period just closed, and we expect to make those awards in summer of 25. And it could be anything that they need for their local roads in those rural areas. This is lot SIP that I was talking about. This is where we really rely on the councils of governments to evaluate the projects that are submitted by their local governments, rank them, and prioritize those proposals. We look at the funding availability, and then we will work with them to make those awards and help those towns deliver on those projects. And then we also have bridge programs, so both supporting local bridges, both through state funding as well as federal funding. And this is a very popular program that we continue to invest in because, as we know, bridges in Connecticut are aging, especially local bridges, and there's a lot of need out there. And also under this program, we've acquired a lot of equipment for vegetation management, new equipment to do pollinator areas, which are part of, we entered into a federal program to increase habitat and protect habitat for monarch butterfly because they are listed or about to be listed as endangered species. So that is going to impact a lot of what we do out there. So we are setting aside as much land as possible for monarch butterfly to protect the species as per the federal government. Public transportation side, so a lot of focus is on upgrading or modernizing the equipment that's out there, upgrading the tracks we have on the railroad side because it's been since the 1800s when a lot of it was built, and improving the travel experience for passengers. So ridership there, you see this ridership 2024 ridership compared to 2019. You know, Waterbury branch and the Hartford line continue to surpass those pre-pandemic ridership numbers. Others continue a steady increase over time. They are generally almost leveling out to a bit. We'll see if some new return to work policies have a difference on that ridership. We also have added service to Shoreline East, some through train service. So we expect that ridership to increase over 2025 with those new trains in service. Here's a list of major public transportation projects on the rail side. I won't go through most of these. I'll just touch on a few in the next following slides, but this will be shared out afterwards so you can see the breadth and scope of some of these programs. So new rail cars are coming into service. All the new M8 rail cars that were procured by the state of Connecticut for service on Metro North are delivered and in service. And so we also have now ordered rail cars for the Hartford line, and as well as some of the branch lines, most likely to be used for that service. And we also have purchased, though they are not yet in development, new dual power locomotives so they can operate on diesel as well as overhead catenary wires. Windsor Lock Station is under construction. We are excited to open it this year. It's going to be a game changer for Windsor Locks, and we're really excited to see all the development that's going to occur there and have better connections to the airport. We also are planning and designing the Enfield station right now. And we have received funding to do additional double tracking on the Hartford line, which will increase the number of trains we can operate on the Hartford line. On the New Haven line, this is where most of the heavy major projects are. So the Walk Bridge program, you see there, that's one of the pits there that are under construction now. It is the largest capital program in our state. It's well over $1 billion. The bridge was built back in the late 1800s, and it is high priority for the entire nation, given the vulnerability of the Northeast Corridor. We also have to then address the Devon Bridge, which is in between Milford and Stratford. So we're going to do interim repairs to that and then do a permanent replacement. And then we'll get to the Saga Bridge and the Coscob Bridge as well. And that would complete our movable rail bridges on the Northeast Corridor. We also have to upgrade all the signal system, the network program, as well as the entire power system on the New Haven line. Thankfully, the federal government has provided us with funds to do a lot of this. On the Waterbury branch line, so we have a program to upgrade every station on the Waterbury branch line to make them ADA accessible. We are building a new Naugatuck station, relocating it down to where they are planning to build a significant increase in housing, and it's directly coordinated with our station project. Renovating the Waterbury station to put a waiting room there. And so all of that should be completed by 2027. And on Shoreline East is owned by Amtrak, but we are actively involved. There is a $1.3 billion project to replace the Connecticut River movable rail bridge that is under construction now and should be completed by 2031. We also are working to complete electrification of Track 6 in New London. Again, that's not our property, but we are paying for that to allow flexibility for trains, Shoreline East trains, to be able to serve that track. And we've, as I mentioned, we increased service on Shoreline East through funding provided by the legislature. That lists those 2 new trains in each direction that were added, one of which is a through train in each direction. So it will go all the way to Stamford instead of stopping in New Haven and making you transfer. Turning to the bus side, this is a map showing our fixed route bus service in the state of Connecticut. As you can see, it's pretty extensive, one of the most extensive in the country for a state. And we're pretty proud of the number of trips that are offered each year on fixed route bus. Bus service did not decline as much as rail service, and it has been pretty steady. Significant benefit to people all across the state who continue to rely on bus service to get to their work, to school, to health appointments, as well as to just do their daily lives. Here's a list of some major bus initiatives. A lot of it is also state aid repair. A lot of our facilities, we are actually approaching the 50th birthday of Connecticut Transit. As some of you may or may not know, the bus system in Connecticut, it used to be a private system, a corporate system. And then in the 70s, when public transportation across the country was collapsing, government stepped in and the state of Connecticut purchased the Hartford, New Haven, and Stamford portions of what was called the Connecticut Company at the time. And that is why it's called HNS. And that is what the large brand of CT Transit is. And so a lot of those facilities are approaching 50 years old, and it's time to do some renovations to them. So here's a better list. So we have received a lot of federal funds for bus service as well, to buy buses, to improve our facilities. And then we also are trying to test out new things to make it easier to use the bus and safer to use the bus and more pleasant. So bus stop enhancement program. We're investing heavily, over $20 million in improving bus stops and adding new bus shelters across the state, not just in CT Transit territory, but every transit district territory. And we launched a microtransit program as well as a pilot for a couple of years. This is the tap and ride. So we're trying to make it, everyone is used to now tapping to buy things. We're trying to make that prevalent across the entire bus fleet. So we're doing a pilot program to show how it can work in some other transit systems. So we're doing the CT Transit Division in Meriden, as well as the River Valley Transit System. And so we're piloting it there, and then we'll be able to look at how it worked and then hopefully work and deploy it across every transit system in the state. Mega projects. So I just want to touch on something that you should probably keep in mind over the next few decades is we built a lot of infrastructure in the 50s and 60s, and it's all it's well past social security age, and it is time to be put back together again and rebuilt. So Greater Hartford Mobility Program 84 and 91 need to be addressed. And so we've released a program over a year ago of what our recommendation is, and we've advanced these programs into the permitting or the design environmental review stage, not permitting yet. So we are proposing to shift and lower I-84 through Hartford, increase to try and align the highway more with the railroad, to increase more development space in Hartford, build more local connections between downtown and the North End, and improve access for bikers and walkers and transit users. We also are going to lower 91 and cap over it, as well as capping over 84. And so that would be, we think, a huge improvement for Hartford economically and physically. The Mixmaster in Waterbury, it is, we just completed a program to temporarily fix it for 20 years until we can take it down. It has to come down. It is a double stacked highway. And so we will be releasing our proposal later this year on how to do that and what the design could look like, and then advance it into design, and then permitting, and then working with the mayors in the region and first selectmen of the region on impacts to their communities. We've briefed the Waterbury delegation and the mayor already on this. Gold Star Memorial Bridge, this is nearly $1 billion project to strengthen this to be able to carry permitted loads. So anything over the 80,000 pound limit for Class 8 and above vehicle, extend that service life of the bridges. The north or the south bridge was built in the 1940s. So it's pretty old. Full deck replacement, strengthening the steel. This is a critical bridge that benefits the all of I-95, but most importantly serves the industrial engine there in Southeast Connecticut that is Electric Boat. And we need to make sure it can continue to support those communities and the businesses there. The walk bridge I touched on, that is well underway. It'll be completed by the end of this decade. And here's a list of big things on the horizon. So touched on Hartford and Waterbury. In Danbury, we need to do something about I-84. So we'll be releasing later this year our proposal for that program. Stamford, we have a study underway as to what to do between exits 7 and 9 in Stamford. Similarly, what to do between the New York State line and exit 7 in Greenwich. Fairfield and Bridgeport, we are kicking off that program to look at how do we address the congestion there from exits 19 to 27A. And then the other large component is what do you do about I-95 in Eastern Connecticut from Branford to Rhode Island border. So those are all studies that are underway. It's following a federal process called Planning Environmental Linkage. It's developing universal alternatives and then narrow down on what those preferred alternatives are and then advance the project into further design and environmental considerations. And each of these is intended to get public input in advance so that we can ensure that we're taking the public's thoughts well in advance of beginning to finalize anything. And so getting to funding piece, so capital program. So Connecticut is we use bonding to support our capital program. So as you can see on there, I know it's difficult to see the bottom, the blue is our federal funds. So that is all formula funds that are coming in. The next section is the bonding authorizations provided by the legislature and then ultimately the bond commission, but the authorizations there you see. The one above that, Public Act 15-1, that was former Governor Malloy's program to ramp up the design efforts within DOT. So there was a significant increase in bond authorizations provided to the DOT to begin designing projects in advance of hopefully when there would be funding available to actually construct those projects. And it was very fortuitous that we did that. We were able to take advantage of the huge increase in federal funding that was provided. And then the top bar there in years 23, 24, 25, those are discretionary grants we've received from the federal government. And then 26 to 29 is our projection as to what our funding will be based on proposed budget. This shows fiscal year 25 bond authorizations broken down by the buckets we're provided them. The largest one on that screen is NEC modernization program. So that's Northeast Corridor. So that is the match for any federal discretionary grants were provided for improvements on the railroad side. Thankfully, the legislature and the governor preemptively gave us match funds for any applications we'd submit to the federal government for the railroad. And it worked out really well because we received well over in excess of $1 billion in grant funds for railroad improvements. And here's our federal funds broken down by the buckets we're provided them. So highways, transit, and then National Highway Traffic Safety, NHTSA. That's the education campaigns, training for law enforcement, things like that. And here's a chart showing some of our discretionary grants that we've received over the past 3 years. And then these are the ones for the railroad side. Okay, so wrapping up, just want to touch on a couple, I want to end on some high notes. Really proud of the success we've had. But looking ahead to the federal government, we had a change in administrations. I'm hopeful that infrastructure continues to be a bipartisan effort. I met with Secretary Duffy a couple weeks ago, the new Secretary of Transportation, and talked to him about the importance of investing in Connecticut's infrastructure, given the amount of traffic we carry, the amount of rail traffic we carry, He said he wants to get back to the basics and build things. So we're hopeful that that collaboration continues. And I'm serving as president of ASHTO, which is the Association of all 52 state DOTs. And given the experience we had in 2024, I made my emphasis areas this year to be safety, focusing on safer communities, safer workers, and safer users. And we had, when we were preparing this presentation, we forgot about what we went through in 2024. We were focused on all the highlights, and then we stopped and we're like, wait, we had some huge wins. And so, you know, none of it would have been possible without the collaboration and efforts of all of our staff when we had the Fairfield Avenue Bridge fire in Norwalk. That we were able to take down that bridge, working with the contracting community, take it down and rebuild it throughout the course of 2024. And then the August flooding in Oxford, Southbury, Seymour, that was devastating to our infrastructure. Working with the local governments as well as our employees who worked days on days on days to design replacements, our employees who went out and secured the infrastructure, and the local governments who also had to deal with their infrastructure impacts. It was a huge success to be able to open those roads as quickly as we did. So on that, I want to end on that high note, and ready for any of your questions or issues you want to talk about, and I will call up my bureau chiefs as appropriate to help answer questions.
Well, I appreciate that really thorough presentation. And I will say I have a ton of questions, but I'm sure a lot of the committee members do. So I'll jump in. First of all, I do want to commend the agency on your responsiveness to the bridge that you just mentioned in Norwalk, and being able to watch that publicly. That was really incredible. I had so many residents who are not from the Norwalk area commenting on, just how amazing it was to watch the entire process. And so hats off to you for, having that thought to make sure it was a public process, and also the flooding, both incredibly devastating situations that you were able to turn around into something really remarkable. So thanks to you and the entire team and all the workers involved in those projects. You mentioned the wrong way driving installation, so I'm just going to go back to that a minute. And in terms of roadway safety, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about roadway safety. First, again, hats off to the agency on being able to install even more than the legislature had asked for. I know we had identified well over 200 locations across the state that could benefit from having these wrong way driving countermeasures. You mentioned that another 200 plus will be installed, and we've allocated $60 million since 2022. Do you have enough funding to do all these locations, 200 plus locations?
Yes, so we did an analysis. We have the funding that's been provided to date is enough to install all the mandated locations plus all the ones that we have now identified as additional ones we'd like to install at.
Okay, terrific. You mentioned pedestrian and motorcycle fatalities. Those numbers are incredibly alarming. All the fatalities are alarming, and certainly it's been, the priority of this committee to take a look at roadway safety. And I am so appreciative of the collaborative relationship we have with the department in making sure that we move forward some important initiatives, including the wrong way driving countermeasures. In terms of the pedestrian and motorcycle fatalities, do we have any reasons for this identified, the uptick? And are most of these involving DUI?
So on the pedestrian ones, no, not most. I wouldn't say that most of them involve DUIs. A lot of them are in the evening. That twilight, like 5 to 7 p.m. time frame is often when it may occur. So we also have a large increasing number of individuals who are killed on the highways, getting out of their vehicle, and they're on the pavement, and they're being struck. And so we've done a campaign to raise awareness about stay in your car. Don't get out. Don't stand on the side of the road. Wait until law enforcement or a tow truck or someone else who has protective lights and equipment can come, but don't stand out there on the highway. And so we're trying to raise awareness about that. But on the pedestrians on like local roads or state roads that go through a community, um, it's usually in the evening, late at night, or poorly lit conditions is what we're seeing. So one of our legislative proposals is to do better what we call daylighting of crosswalks. So you increase the space by which cars cannot encroach upon a crosswalk and park there, because what we see happening is people will approach a crosswalk and the drivers can't see them because there's cars blocking that. But then the other piece is, if you look at the trend line for pedestrian fatalities, um, it's corresponding to increased cell phone usage behind the wheel, as well as larger vehicles. Vehicles are much larger today. When I was struck by a car in a crosswalk back in like 2010 in Washington, D.C., I rolled over the hood because it was a sedan. Now, if you're hit by some of these larger vehicles, you're going to go under the vehicle. And so that's where we're seeing more people dying as a result of pedestrian strikes instead of serious injuries. And so it can be one of everything, but a lot of it's occurring in the evening, larger vehicles, and distractions. And you always have, if it's late at night, it's probably impairment as well.
That's helpful. Thank you. And I think we have maybe some of these things in some bills we might be hearing coming up. Automated enforcement, Washington's the only town that's received approval. You mentioned there's other towns who have submissions waiting to be approved, or applications rather. How many towns, and do we need to do something in terms of raising awareness to municipalities around this program that they could have in place?
I don't know if we have to raise awareness, because we have had many municipalities reach out to us inquiring about it. We've seen it, many communities talking in the news about their looking into this. So we have, I think, 3 applications in, and then we have many others that have gone to their local legislative bodies to seek approval, but the applications are not yet in our office. And the legislature, um, rightfully so, set it up to be a rigorous process because there was a lot of apprehension around the program. It's not intended to be a money grab. It's intended to improve safety. And so the restrictions placed around the program really was intended to make it difficult to put it in place so that it's only used to improve safety and it's not intended to generate revenue, right? And so I think it's working the way it was intended. I think there was a lot of fear when we passed this that everyone would rush to install it everywhere and just catch people and raise money. And that's not what's happening. The applications we're receiving are very detailed and very thoughtful, and it's not a scatter shot. It's very targeted at places where there are clear safety problems.
Okay, that's really helpful. In terms of congestion, I cannot tell you the number of questions I get on this from constituents, from folks all across the state saying, why aren't they widening I-95 in this area? Why aren't they doing that? And so my answer is often what we've spoken about before, the concept of induced demand, and that road widening doesn't typically work. In fact, you touched on why many towns go, there's places where we put them on road diets. Obviously, we can't put I-95 on a road diet in these areas. We're not going to widen I-95. It seems to me that we would want to promote public transportation in these situations. You touched on that a little bit. But let's just talk for a minute about the issue with, cutting funding on something like Shoreline East and having a traffic problem. I'm going to speak to my district because I know it. And I know you said that there's a study, about points it from Branford Points East, the study will look at all of these things. But I guess what is the solution to these problems if we're not widening the road, if we're not putting them on a road diet, if we are not increasing public transportation in those areas? What are the potential solutions?
So you have to start from the beginning and look at where people are going. So what we do when we do these studies is we're using an origin and destination study. So consultants use cell phone data. Everyone who has a cell phone, your data is being sold to companies. They anonymize it, but they're able to show us where are people starting their trip and ending their trip. And they're able to tell us, the transportation planners in our agency, This is where the majority of people are traveling these times of days. You're able to break it down. And so that you're able to really go in and see where do you need to target improvements? Where are they bottling up? And what we've seen in what we're doing in Stanford right now, we have a project in Stanford right now to extend an auxiliary lane. So we're not going to widen the highway through there at this location between exit 6 and 7, where people are coming on the highway and then they have to immediately merge into a travel lane. So instead of having them immediately merge, because that weaving is what causes a lot of the delays, we are extending that merge lane further until the next exit. So that way they have longer to merge onto the highway so they don't have to merge quickly, which causes people to slam on their brakes. And then it's a ripple effect back down the main line. So that's really where targeted improvements at individual locations on a highway main line can eliminate a lot of the driver behavior induced congestion. You're never going to eliminate congestion. If you eliminate congestion, that means there's no economic activity in that location. If you build multiple additional lanes, makes it easier for someone to use that highway. Well, then they're not going to use public transportation. They're not going to use the local roads, which may be slower. They'll jump on the highway and use it as a local road. Then once everyone starts doing that over a year or two, then it's just congested again. So you can do the targeted improvements. You're never going to eliminate congestion, but you will make it reliable and predictable. That's what people need, is just they need to know when they leave their home, it's going to take me this long to get to where I need to go. So you can get that predictability by eliminating weaving induced delays as well as crash induced delays. Like here, 91, 691, 15 in Meriden area, that congestion is caused because of the crashes that occur and the weaving that occurs. We have enough lanes there, but it's just the geometry is such poorly laid out that people are crashing and weaving, and that's what's causing those delays and congestion in that location. So if we can eliminate that, you can make a more predictable travel trip for everyone on the highways.
That's helpful. And I would imagine that's sort of what's part of what's happening at exit 74 as well in Lyme. And that should help that area. And I'm going to just take further privileges as chair. I have two more questions and then I'll turn it over to the committee because I'm sure lots of questions. Shoreline East, my favorite topic. We will be having a public hearing on this. You mentioned about Amtrak owning the line, but also I just wanted to talk about two things with respect to Shoreline East. Number one, we enabled a bid process to take place. I believe the RFP went out. Would love an update from you on that. And also in terms of the additional $5 million that we were able to secure, what's been done there has been phenomenal. Again, Ben and team has done a great job of working with commuters on what would work well. But there is a hiccup coming back, going back east in the evenings in terms of peak service. So just wanted an update on those two things.
Yep. So on the bid process, so we did receive bids to operate Shoreline East, to operate the Hartford line, as well as to maintain the equipment of both services. So those bid packages are being reviewed and reviewing those proposals. Multiple questions back and forth between us and the bidders. So we need to get a selected vendor this spring or early summer is our goal. So we continue to analyze those bid packages. In terms of the added trains, yeah, I mean, so we live by Amtrak's capital projects. And so we're always happy to work with riders to see what could be tweaked to address that. But Amtrak is always going to prioritize passage of Acela trains and then Northeast Regional trains before giving us slots for Shoreline East trains. And so that's what's really impacting. They're doing their capital work out there on the railroad. Then they're going to shift all the travel patterns. And so it's like a waterfall effect. If they're going to shift an Acela train, they want to keep that as close to schedule as possible, keep the Northeast Regional trains to schedule. And then if they have to shift things for Shoreline East, they will, because unfortunately it's only 2-track territory, unlike west of New Haven where we have a 4-track territory. So you have a little more flexibility. But we definitely can set up time for our rail planners to sit with you and any advocates to talk about options that they may want to look at.
That's great. And we're going to be hearing from the Connecticut Public Transportation Council later today. We have a hearing with them as well, informational, and I'm sure they'll have some input on what they'd like to see since they have sort of that direct line to commuters. But I get so frustrated when we see these charts, and I'm so pleased to see riderships increased on Shoreline East, but it is out of the lines, the one line that where we didn't restore service post-pandemic. And so we're really not comparing apples to apples when we're looking at increased ridership. In fact, it's almost a case for why you should increase service, because you can see when you increase service, the riders come back. So I think I'm preaching to the choir, but maybe. Anyway, and my very last question is just on funding. We did receive significant funding from the federal government, IIJA in particular, the orange bars there. Has that funding been secured, or is Connecticut definitely getting those funds? I know we have projects earmarked for those funds. I just would love to hear from you what your thoughts are there.
So formula funds continue to, it's in statute. We continue to receive our apportionment of formula funds. The discretionary grants, we were awarded them. Many of them don't have signed contract agreements in place yet. So we continue to work with the federal government to try and advance those signed contracts to be able to access those funds. With any change in administrations, there's a pause on, activity. And so I think that's what we're seeing now, where every state DOT in the country is seeing a slowdown in activity within the U.S. Department of Transportation, where documents are not processing out of the department. So we're hopeful once they staff up their political appointees in each modal administration, highways, transit, rail, that things will begin to process again. Because we do have the construction season in the northern climate areas, other than the south, have restrictions on when we can do construction. We also have time of year restrictions for species that may be living in the water, or in a geographic area. So construction is usually balanced on a pinhead, and so any delay of even a few weeks can blow an entire construction season, and that's what we're trying to relay to the federal government.
Thank you for that. And great to hear that you had a successful meeting with Secretary Duffy and that you're heading up AASHTO. I think that all bodes well for the state of Connecticut, and grateful to you and what you do. I'll turn it over to my co-chair.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And as you were asking your questions, I was dramatically crossing off many of mine. So fortunately for the entire committee, a lot of my line of questioning is going to be reduced. One of the things that when I'm hearing from my colleagues on the committee and off, one of the things that is most prevalent is the reckless driving concerns that we all share. You talked a little bit about the traffic stops, and on that graph where we saw that there were about 100,000 fewer between 2020 and now. What is needed, in your opinion, to get our numbers up? And I'm not talking about increasing fines and punishing folks who are breaking the law. I'm talking really specifically to get down those numbers of reckless driving incidents that we're seeing. I know that it is there are concerns about the number of folks who are out there being able to even enforce the law. What can you ask of us? What can we do to help get those numbers up?
I don't know if I think that's really a question for Commissioner Higgins and for all the local police chiefs. We are doing our part in providing them with whatever they tell us they need to support them. So that's why we stood up the DRE program. We've stood up the Advanced Roadside Impairment Detection Education, ARIDE program, which every law enforcement officer who goes through the process to become a police officer in the state has to become ARIDE certified. It's like the step between basic and DRE. Police phlebotomy, we're giving them all the tools they need, and we want to continue to support them. We also support DUI checkpoints and distracted driving visibility campaigns. So we pay law enforcement departments to go do overtime shifts to enforce seatbelts, distracted driving, impaired driving. So that's where we're we're doing our part to continue to support that. But I think asking the police chiefs or Commissioner Higgins will be a better, because I'm not a trained law enforcement officer, so I talk a lot to them, but I don't want to speak for them.
That's fair. I do want to, I want to make sure that I heard clearly one of the points that you made. Did you say that every few days a crash truck is crashed into by a driver? Okay, I was just making
Yes.
sure I heard that right.
Yeah.
Every few days.
Yep.
Incredible. One of the other issues that I think we hear about from our colleagues is ease of finding information as it relates to being able to help our municipalities. So I'm curious if you can speak a little bit to how municipalities find the information that they're seeking when we're talking about not only funding, but safety information, the road safety audits, things like that. I know that you've been working a lot on trying to get that sort of cleaned up and organized in a way that makes it easier for municipalities to access, easier for us as legislators to help them to do that. Can you speak a little to some of the advancements that you've made and what you're looking to do?
Sure. So we stood up a new unit in our agency, an intergovernmental unit. So taking what we've done historically for legislators, where we have a unit that does constituent service work, as well as liaison that comes over here and works directly with you and your staff. We stood up a unit that is dedicated just to working with municipalities. So we sent letters out to every municipal chief elected official, letting them know who the points of contact are in our agency. We have an open door policy, working with all of them. We also work really closely with the Council of Governments. So the COGS are the federally designated planning organization for transportation at the local level. And so we work really closely with them and coordinate with them on transmitting information through the COG to local governments, as well as directly from our staff to local governments. We're constantly trying to communicate to them. If you have questions, if you need something, come to us. We're here to help you. And then we have staff that are working in each community every single day. So our garages are located there. Their liaison, they're coordinating with the public works staff on a daily basis in each community. So we're trying to share as much information out as possible. Some municipalities are much better at communicating back with us and asking us questions than others. But we want them all to know that we have this unit dedicated to just helping them. And then that unit basically is the intake, and then we'll put them in touch with all of our subject matter experts to work with them on a daily basis.
That's terrific to understand. I know that with a lot of the municipalities, a lot of the questions when they're looking for where's the safety audit that we asked for, and it turns out that that was actually something that was federally allocated, the grant there, but they're looking in the state, and the state says, well, we have no evidence that that was even ever requested, because and it's to streamline that, I think, is going to be extremely helpful, and it's going to help us get those projects and the money to use much more quickly. So I'm really grateful for that. I think with that, I'm going to end my questioning and turn it back over to my co-chair. Thank you so much, Commissioner.
Great. Next, we'll go to the good ranking member from the House, Representative Kennedy, followed by Rep Reyes, and then Rep Bronco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's nice to see you, Commissioner. Seems like you were just before me in another committee meeting. And I apologize. I did listen to your presentation in my office because I was at an appropriations meeting right next door. So, but thank you. Just kind of two things, segueing off kind of what Chairwoman Berger Javala was just saying, and I just totally lost my train of thought, but let me get back to that. Go back to your report, and you're talking about some of the traffic enforcement devices. Did you say how many towns had submitted to this date so far? I know of like 2. Is there more? How many are we up to?
3 have submitted, one's been approved, but then multiple others, we have been in contact with us, and have taken steps locally to go to their local town council or local legislative body to seek approval. And so I think that's that first step they need to do to then get approval, and work on the program to then apply to us.
Thank you. I know one of my towns has gone through the process and they're still working on it. So thank you for that. Interesting what you just said about your flag cars that are hit. I kind of like I did a cringe and a pray on my way up here today because this car just came flying from the far right-hand lane, and it's like there's like cars there, and it's like just, but I, so reckless driving. I'm not sure how we're going to address it. It's just a trend. It seems like, and we've just got to double down on these people and just keep issuing fines, I guess, and perhaps maybe infractions of sorts and getting back to it. But my one question, and thank you for everything you did with that storm, the August storm that really decimated the valley, Route 8, Oxford, Southbury. Because of all the work that you did, and I thank you because I think I was on a lot of the calls, your weekly calls, and I really thank you for that. Did the work that you had to do there, that set you back on any other projects that were working on at the time?
We did have to pull staff off of various projects to prioritize the design of those recovery efforts. I wouldn't say it set us back. The team's been working mightily to try and catch up on those. So nothing slipped significantly
Mhm.
in terms of schedules, but there were some things that had to be postponed, some programmatic efforts that had to be postponed to focus on the recovery efforts. So a lot of our bridge team was heavily involved in the effort to do the design of the new bridges, and so that was a focus where they had to pivot to the flooding recovery.
And that brings me to staffing, if it hasn't been asked. And so were you impacted by staffing, and how are you with staffing at this point?
Yeah, so we have around 230 vacancies, I believe. So we're at 3,300 staff right now. We're authorized to have 3,567. When I back in 2021, 2022, we were down at 2,800 employees. So we are, as of today, we're at our highest staffing level since 2002.
Great.
So it's impressive how much work has gone into filling positions. With if we had not received the support from the legislature and the governor to increase our authorized headcount, so we were down in the 3,300s as our cap on staffing. Before the infrastructure bill became law, there was an effort to increase our authorized headcount because we saw the bill was coming. Without that, we would be way behind in our capital program.
Thank you for that. And just last question, just so I can better understand it. When you were talking about the auxiliary lane before, how many of those do we have? And if I'm understanding it, there's one, I believe, in Hamden when you get on from Dixwell Avenue heading southbound. Is that what you call an auxiliary lane there?
Yeah, so it's not a frontage road or anything, right? I mean, so like in East Haven, in New Haven and East Haven, where 95, where you can get off, and it's like a frontage road that runs parallel
Right.
to the highway. It's not that. It's actually when you come onto the highway, instead of immediately having to merge, it just continues as a straight lane until the next exit.
I see.
So
Okay.
to give you more time to either merge and give people more time to get to the right to exit. And so one location we're going to be doing that, kicking off next year, is in West Haven this year, Jim, in West Haven, because as many people know, when you traveling from 91 South to get into 95, or from 95 from the east side to come through New Haven, the Q Bridge made it easy for people to flow through. Then you hit West Haven and everyone stops because there's a lot of people weaving and merging there. So we are going to extend an auxiliary lane there to kind of eliminate some of that weaving that occurs and hopefully free up some of that.
That is wonderful to hear because that's what I hit every day when I go home from here. And you have those exits that are exit onlys, right? Two in a row. And so I'm looking forward to that. Okay. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Representative Reyes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, good to see you again. Just want to talk a little bit about the east end of Waterbury. So the expansion there pretty much funneled the traffic right into the center of Waterbury, and it's kind of bogged down again on the west end. I didn't hear anything about future plans in that area to try to get that traffic through the center of Waterbury. Your thoughts on that right now?
Yeah, so as part of that new mix program, it's not just focused on the mix master itself, it's also looking at the local roads. So what we've seen in Connecticut is a lot of the problems we have on our interstate highway system is a lot of people in Connecticut use the interstate system as a local road. So if we can improve local road conditions to avoid them having to jump on the highway, it's going to make things a lot better for everyone traveling on the interstate. Part of, and I'll set up a time to get our team to come brief you on some of what we're looking at for the new mix, because we're looking at rebuilding some of the roadways over the I-84 to connect north and south of there, including on the east side, to redo the bridge and kind of make it a signature bridge. So anyone coming through will see, like, make it signify Waterbury and make it so people feel comfortable walking across. But we also are focused working with the city on a lot of local road improvements in the downtown area and to improve traffic flow throughout that whole region. We are looking at in the south end as well to do some improvements on South Main.
That's great, Commissioner. Thank you. And to your point, the frontage roads on the east end are working wonderfully, uh, as planned probably. I have a bigger concern now thinking about, the reckless driving and so forth. And my question to you is, what is the reservation with the red light cameras and that you said only the city or town of Washington is using them? What is holding us all up?
So a few other municipalities have applied. I think it's there's a cost associated with it. So local governments need to be willing to take on that cost burden. It's still split public opinion. I think it's probably split 50-50 if people like it or don't like it. I think people, the more they learn about it, the more the benefits of it and how much it improves safety, you begin to win people over. So I'm hopeful that as we see more of them being used across the state, it will become more accepted. I think speed cameras are probably a little bit easier to deploy than red light cameras. I think red light cameras really are only intended to be used where you have a crash history of people actually going through a red light and hitting someone. Whereas speed cameras, the legislation was very targeted. If you have a school zone there, you can do it. If you have a pedestrian safety zone, you can do it, or any place where you have a history of speeding. So, and I think that's public opinion is a little more accepting of those speed cameras than red light cameras, because I think a lot of people think that if they go through that yellow light, which I know a lot of people do, that they're going to be caught. And they hear horror stories of 15 years ago when people would set the timing to be off a little bit so that they could catch more people. Those are things like in the past that don't occur anymore because the way the statute was written, it's really protective.
Thank you, Commissioner. And yeah, I gotta tell you, it's driving these days is really a challenge, and I really worry about the new drivers and that are not used to any kind of safety roles. That I mean, every access roads, main roads, side roads, it really doesn't matter anymore. It's pretty dangerous anywhere. The last thing you mentioned and I want to thank the commissioner and the state of Connecticut for all the work that's happened at the Waterbury rail line, which is very, very well used. And my question is going north. Why haven't we considered connecting Hartford and Waterbury directly to eliminate some of that I-84 traffic?
So there was a study that was completed on that before I got to the DOT. It found it to be exceedingly expensive to repair those tracks. There's an old tunnel, I believe, maybe through Terryville, that is basically just blasted through rock face. And it's the trackage. So we can get you a copy of that. It was just shown to be very expensive to be able to reinstate those tracks. So what we've been looking at instead is to try and increase express bus service, both to Hartford, but also now there's express bus service from Waterbury to Meriden as well to try and provide better connectivity east from Waterbury. But we can get you a copy of that report.
Please, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for the DOT's work, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Bronco, followed by Rep. Zawistowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I'd just like to thank you for such an in-depth presentation. It's very helpful to see all that information laid out like that. So, and we spoke when you came to Naugatuck, but I'd just like to take the opportunity to commend you publicly for your leadership of the department. It's evident from viewing from the outside, just seeing the work that the department's doing in the midst of some historic events, like you mentioned with the bridge fire and unprecedented flooding. And it was it was really nice to watch how effectively the department responded to all of that. And I had the opportunity to go on a ride along with my local DOT garage, and which is up in that area, and was barely 2 months removed from the flooding, and roadways were opened up. And knowing what it looked like in that area during the flooding to what your team was able to accomplish in that short time was remarkable. So I do want to commend you for that and thank you for the work. And also on that ride along, everyone spoke very highly of you. So that's why I know that you're doing well, because it's one thing to hear from people up here, but to hear from the people on the ground that are doing the work and that appreciate your leadership, that speaks more to me. So, and I know you've been making an effort to go around the state and visit all the garages, and I know that is appreciated by your team. So thank you for that, and just thank you for the work that we're doing in Naugatuck. I think we're might be a poster child for some of the top DOT initiatives. We're getting the new train station, which I believe is about underway almost with construction.
Yeah, we'll start construction this year.
Yep. So we got the train station coming. We have our roundabout underway, and we were one of the early installers of the wrong way detection that has proved successful just in that trip you made to town, which I think in that time span was nearly 20 detections, almost all of which self-corrected. So I just want to thank you for the attention you're giving to that whole valley area, for the work you do, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. You've always been very open about what's going on, and very transparent. So I appreciate that, and I look forward to the work continuing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Rep. Zawistowski, followed by Rep. Mara.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here today. In your presentation, I noticed that you had renderings of the Windsor Locks train station, and it is progressing really, really well. It's going to be a transformative project for Windsor Locks, and really appreciate all the work that's been put into it. Also happy to see that Hartford Line is doing well. One thing that I think would really help the Hartford Line, and I know you have no control over this, but would be an east-west accessibility, east-west rail between Springfield and Boston. And in your role, your new role is in AASHTO, I don't know if you have the opportunity to talk to your counterparts in Massachusetts. It would be wonderful to find out if you've heard anything about any progress on that.
Yeah, I want to call Ben Limmer up. He just met with MassDOT on that as recently. They have a great program that the governor up there and the Massachusetts DOT is working on called Compass Rail. So if you can just give a brief update on Compass.
Sure thing. Ben Limmer, Bureau Chief of Public Transportation. Yeah, so as the commissioner mentioned, MassDOT, I think it was last year, received a federal grant to take a look at capital improvements to the rail line connecting Boston with Springfield. And so they are eagerly getting ready to start that capital work. And they are also working with Amtrak on adding trains from Boston to Springfield and then ultimately heading further west. And then, of course, south to New Haven, as well as further points south. So they're working on a very robust rail plan. It is called Compass, as the commissioner mentioned, and we can point you to where those stuff is online. Happy to.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm glad to hear. I had heard about that they had gotten some federal funding to study this, and I wasn't sure where it was going to go. But I think that I'm less concerned about it going to Pittsfield than I am going to Boston. But, but I'm sure the people in Pittsfield would disagree. Anyway, no, I appreciate that answer, I'm hoping that's something that's going to come down the road for too long.
Yeah, it will be a game changer for Central Connecticut to be able to access Boston like that. We've consistently supported MassDOT's efforts, communicating to the federal government about the importance of this project because we know it's a game changer for Hartford, for Windsor Locks, for Enfield, and the town south of Hartford as well. Just have that better access into Springfield, Worcester, Boston. It would be a huge win for Central Connecticut.
And Bradley Airport.
Yes.
Um, I have one additional question unrelated. I've been on this committee for a while, and one of the things that have been a constant question, especially more years ago, it's been less so before, is the difficulty that DOT has attracting and retaining engineering talent. I wanted to find out if that has been resolved because that's been pretty quiet over the past couple of years compared to previous years. How is that going?
So it continues to be an effort. It's not just in Connecticut, it's national. It's a national problem where we are not graduating enough engineers, especially here in Connecticut. So we have expanded our recruitment efforts. Historically, over the life of the agency, we focus on people graduating from schools in Connecticut or looking a little bit north to WPI and a little bit south. Now we have expanded the past 2 years our recruitment efforts to go further south. We're doing targeted uh, uh, social media ads surrounding some schools with heavy engineering degrees, as well as historically Black colleges and universities with engineering programs. And we go to job fairs down in the Mid-Atlantic as well as way up in northern New England. So we've had to expand our search, our net of search. But we continue to struggle to get applicants on the engineering side. We are at our historic staffing levels, but we still have over a 10% vacancy rate in engineers. So we continue to work with whoever will work with us to try and build that pipeline of people going into engineering and try to capture them. And we started an internship program to try and get people while they're in college, expose them to the state DOT, and then we are now able to offer them a job like 6 to 9 months before they graduate, so that they will commit to us, to try and get them before they get out of school, because that's what the private sector is doing. They will offer them a job a year to 9 months in advance. So we want to try and do that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Rep. Mara, followed by Representative Morin-Bella.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. So appreciate you being here. And I feel like the problem child in the committee because I feel like I'm always bugging you, but please understand I do have a very congested area. So I do feel like I'm constantly having 3 or 4 issues going at one time. But one of the ones that I wanted to talk about, and I know you're going to supply us with some of your slides, which I appreciate, looking at the Metro North line, especially, so I'm in Darien, I cover Norwalk as well. We go into New York to work, and more so now that there's a congestion charge in New York. And we have seen, certainly anecdotally, and I'm not sure if it's always necessarily on your records, that the trains are very packed these days. And I know that we've had cars that have decreased and a couple times that have decreased and stops that have decreased. So I don't know, do you have any say in that, or where's your relationship with Metro North to discuss something like that?
Yeah, so before they make any service adjustments or schedule changes, they talk to our Rails team. I will say, well before COVID and then after COVID, we always get the trains are packed. And then when we are able to pull specific trains, so if like a constituent tells you I was on this train and it was packed, we're able to go back and talk to Metro North and get the data and say, actually it was only at an 85% capacity. And often I'm not saying every complaint we get on this issue is incorrect, but it's often the experience of the user. People are not sitting in the middle seat anymore, right? They're standing instead, which the people in the past used to sit in the middle seat. No one liked it, but people did it. And if you are in the front trains, the first like 3 or 4 trains, those are always much more full than the last train, because when you get into Grand Central, you don't want to be on the back car and have to walk through the entire length of that platform of concourse. So we're always happy to, like, if there's specific train numbers you have, our Rails team can pull the data. And then if we see specific crowding occurring on specific train sets, we can talk to them and say, hey, what are you going to do to address this? Because if it is uncomfortable for someone, then they're going to be turned off from taking the train and switch to their car instead, which is not what we want.
Right. No, I certainly appreciate that. Sometimes my concern is that I don't know if people are maybe not showing tickets and it's not coming up that it's really full, because I hear you. There certainly was a time where I wasn't sitting in the middle seat either. But now we have they talk over the loudspeaker that you can't have your bags in the seat. You can, move your feet down. So it's back to the regimented, be a good neighbor. So
Yeah.
I think the mindset is switching a little
It
bit more.
is.
Yeah.
And it's not just the tickets anymore. So they also, every vehicle now has weights. So they have the load factors. So they're able to not just look at tickets, but also look at, based on the weight of the train, how full do they estimate it was too. So, and they'll be able to tell us by each individual car what the load factor was. So they're getting better at being able to pinpoint when there's specific load factor issues occurring. But definitely, please pass those up to us, and we'll always work with you on those.
Okay, no, thank you. And I love the new app that actually shows the seats that are available. We use that often. I had 2 more questions if you don't mind. You mentioned Waze and how much data you're getting from them. I know we've got a bill. I don't even know if it's going to be brought forward or not, but looking at how some of these navigational systems actually take traffic off of 95 and throw it into our side roads, which has been such issues in my neck of the woods. We've got overpasses that can't fit those trucks that try to go underneath them. And it, obviously blocks up some of the side roads. Is there a way, do you have relationships already with some of these navigational people? Maybe this doesn't need to be a bill at all. Maybe this needs to be a discussion.
So it is a discussion amongst not just our state DOT, but every state DOT in the nation is talking to them about the trucks is the big issue that we're talking to them about, because especially New York has the same problem we have, as well as Delaware and a few others that have old infrastructure where the trucks are not able to pass under the bridges, whether it's a railroad bridge or a roadway bridge. The navigation apps have not shown any interest in putting in place warnings about low bridges, because they do not, my impression is they don't want to be held liable if they're wrong. So if a truck driver, generally what we see is it's people, not the professional truck drivers that are the issue. It's the people maybe we'll call a weekend warrior, right? Where they rent a U-Haul or a rider truck, and they aren't used to using a professional trucker GPS system. And they're using just Waze or Google Maps on their personal phone, which is not intended for professional commercial vehicles. And so then they end up ignoring the postings and signs everywhere and hit the bridges. So New York State DOT, myself, we've talked to the navigation apps. They don't have an interest in addressing that on the personal device side. Many of them, such as TomTom and others that cater to professional drivers, are doing it, but then they do not have an interest in restricting anyone off of a public road. Traffic's traffic. It's like water. It's going to flow where there's the least resistance. And so if it's a public road, it's in the public domain. Anyone can use it. So that's the navigation app's position, is we can't limit it to just specific roads because we don't know what people are using the app for, right? So that's the position they have.
Okay, thank you. And then just one last question. I appreciate Representative Zawistowski mentioning the interns, and there are a lot of good to know engineers in my neck of the woods too that are looking for these internships, and we were under the impression that the Walk Bridge area was going to be sponsor or having interns there too. And I'm not seeing that. And I've looked on the website. I don't see as clear information about the internship. So I love that you're supporting them. If I can maybe get some more information, and if there's ways to support it down in our neck of the woods too. I think when a lot of the kids come home from summer, I think they would, that would be an opportunity they would really appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the construction, so like construction projects, we generally get less interest in construction internships. Usually a lot of the applications are for the design side, and those are housed in Newington. So like working on the walk bridge, that would be posted as like construction engineering, but we can work to get you some information on. And the headquarters for the construction team for your neck of the woods is in New Haven. It's called District 3 Construction. So that's where most of those internships will be posted. But we'll get in touch with you on internship opportunities.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Representative. And on your question regarding congestion on side roads, that's where we put in our plug for freight rail, more freight rail. Get the trucks off the road. Next, we have Rep. Morambello, followed by Representative Farrar.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. It's nice to have you here. Thank you for the presentation. I had a couple quick questions about busing. In Wethersfield, we don't have great rail system in Wethersfield. But the buses, how do you review ridership and make determinations on changes to bus routes and systems?
Yeah, so the bus system, making any changes to routes or stops is a federal process under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. So we have to be very careful about adjusting anything that may have a disproportionate impact. So usually if the local government will come to us or riders come bring concerns to CT Transit, then we'll look at CT Transit planning staff will look at what's the ridership, do we need to make an adjustment to serve a new business that may be opening that needs to get workers to there. We did that recently in Berlin, added service to serve a new industrial park. So specifically in this case, we also do an effort where it's a comprehensive service analysis where we look at the entire region. And so we're planning to kick one of those off in the Hartford region in the next couple of years to look at the entirety of bus service, which was based off of the old trolley lines. And a lot of them have not been adjusted since. And so they need to be looked at based on geographic or demographic patterns of where people are living, where people are working. So that's an effort that we're planning to do in the next couple of years in this region.
Thank you. And then my other question is about the new buses. You said we're getting new buses coming in. What kind of technology will they have? Currently, if you want to ride a bus, I'm sorry, I have not ridden a bus in a long time. Currently, if you want to ride a bus, you have to pay in cash. Is that right?
You have other options. So we did move towards now anyone on their cell phone can buy a bus pass on their phone.
Okay.
It's through the transit app, which does live tracking of every bus, and then you can also purchase a bus pass, a one-off pass on there, and you show it to the driver. You also can buy a Go CT card, which is a refillable card. The goal will be though to have you can tap a credit card and go. That's where we want to get
Okay.
to. It's called open loop technology, where
Right,
that's where we're testing that right now in Meriden and in River Valley Transit, and the goal will be to deploy that statewide in the next couple of years.
And then in implementing that, would you eliminate cash use on?
No, you
buses?
can never eliminate cash because there's a large portion of the population that is unbanked.
Right, right.
So we always need to have cash options in one form or another. But it's about making it easier for everyone else to use it so they don't have to carry cash.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then my other question was, you talked about express bus routes, so people may be on buses for, more than 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Are those buses going to have technology on them? You get on a train, you get on a plane, there might be Wi-Fi, there might be charging to charge devices and so forth. Will buses in the future have any of that?
So local buses today do have Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Express buses do not. That in the next version of express buses, we'll need to address that. express buses generally also don't have charging ports. Some do.
Mhm.
The local buses do. The express buses are aging equipment.
Okay.
You know, the coach style buses, those are ones we do need to replace.
Mhm.
So the local ones, though, are in a much more frequent cyclical replacement. They put a lot more miles on. And those all now are being, they all have Wi-Fi and they all are having charging ports as well.
Good, good. And then just one comment when we were talking about navigation devices or navigation tools. Um, I also noticed that they don't, we were, we rented a U-Haul and had to drive to Philadelphia, and there was no way that we could navigate that using
Now,
devices.
the cookware.
Oh.
We will-
And and keeping us off of the parkways. It continuously wanted to put us on a parkway. And that was a challenge for us and something we hadn't been exposed to before because we hadn't ever had to drive with one.
That's definitely is the issue. Like they don't want to have that as an option. They don't want to incur that risk of telling people, yes, it's safe to use this in a U-Haul or a
Mhm.
box truck, but then it's actually not. And so they don't provide that as an option in any of in Google, Apple, or Waze. But New York State DOT is talking to them extensively because Hutchinson Parkway, Southern State Parkway, all those other parkways, they have the same problem we have on the Merritt.
Yeah. And do you continue to find commercial vehicles on the Merritt an issue?
Every day.
Thanks so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Farrar, followed by Representative McCarthy-Vahey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thanks for spending your afternoons. We appreciate it. We appreciate you, and I will get to my questions to make sure we keep this fun rolling. Going back to the red light and speed camera program, you spoke to, obviously there's some applications coming through, which is good to know. I wanted to know if the state DOT had thought about or received any requests in producing or helping with some tested public education messages that municipalities could use. Just kind of thinking forward about economies of scale so that municipalities aren't doing this on their own and how to make sure folks are using what you would have as tested marketing. Is that something the department has talked about or would consider?
We haven't yet. We'd be happy to work with municipalities on that. You know, when we'd made changes to state law on pedestrian issues about crosswalks, and we did a statewide marketing campaign around that. So I think it's a great idea, and we'd be happy to work with any municipalities looking at this.
Thank you. That would be much appreciated and would be happy to follow up with you on it. Secondly, I know you brought up the bus stop enhancement program that we had pursued. Can you give a little more information about where we are with the allocation of those funds? Have they been expended? Is there a need to re-up the funding needed?
So the first installations will be occurring this spring. It's a multi-year program, and so for this biennial budget, we have not made a request for additional funds because the first installations will occur this spring, and we expect it to go the next couple of years. It's, you know, as with any public works project, we have to follow all the procurement guidelines, public bidding processes, enter negotiations, and sign contracts. And so it takes a lot longer than I think many people think. You can just pick up the phone and ask someone to install bus shelters, and it takes a lot longer than that, unfortunately.
Thank you for that. So is the determination of where those locations are going to be public yet, or that's something that's coming out soon?
We haven't published a map yet. The councils of governments know what's in our first tranche because we took the input from them based on what their municipalities told them. Yeah, I'll work with the team on getting a map updated. So
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I know the committee would appreciate it. Also, just getting back to our train discussion, always great to hear the Hartford line is surpassing, no offense to any other line, but we're doing well on the Hartford line with participation. Can you share when the double tracking will be complete? Because I know that's been an essential part of us pursuing our goals of having new stations in West Hartford and Newington, and wanted to know where we are with that.
So should be starting construction on this next phase, we'd call phase 3B this year, depending on how the federal government does in freeing up things on their end. You know, a lot of projects are awaiting a release of signed documentation at the federal level with this changeover in administrations. So we're hopeful that will be freed up and we can start construction on Phase 3B this year. Last a couple of years, but it's always contingent on Amtrak. Amtrak also is stretched, so Amtrak resources need to either provide coverage, flagging support to protect any workers out on the railroad. So we're contingent on Amtrak's ability to support those projects. So we're hopeful that it will stay on track. No pun intended. So.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we'll look forward for updates on that. And then finally, just getting to some of the comments that were made around workforce development for your agency. I know with the previous administration, there was a focus around the allowable use of infrastructure funds for workforce development. Is that something that your agency pursued? And do you all have a capture of how those were used? I think that would be helpful just for our committee to know more about.
Yeah, so we there wasn't much clarity in the past at the federal level on how we could use those funds. So we've tried to be innovative and we've started to use those funds to do more internship supports, training. We're looking at other ways to partner with universities, including UConn, Central Connecticut State University. We're entering into MOUs to support their programs. The chief engineer and I just met with the new dean of the College of Engineering to talk about better partnerships there. So we are putting requests into the feds on better utilization of those funds because there was not, basically the guidance was, yeah, come to us with ideas because they never really published what you could use the funds for other than just workforce development. So we're coming to them with ideas and we're hopeful it'll be approved.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I know a lot of other states kind of came up with creative approaches to embed that more in how they were approaching this work as an agency. So happy to keep that conversation going because we want to make sure you have the workforce and that we're pulling from all of the talent that we have in the state. So thank you to the commissioner. Thank you to the chairs for the indulgence.
Thank you, Representative. Next, we have Representative McCarthy Vahey, the good chair of the Public Health Committee, followed by Representative Baumgartner.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Commissioner. It's a delight to see you here and be here in transportation with our leaders. I have 4 questions for you, one about microtransit, one about bus, one about rail, and one about phlebotomy/impaired driving. So I'll try and be quick. Microtransit, where do we have programs now, and is there an effort to expand those, especially in our rural areas?
So we did a competitive solicitation for municipalities and COGs and regions to apply for funding. We did fund everyone who applied. There's 9 pilot programs in place today, as well as some pre-existing programs, such as in southeastern Connecticut, they had a program in place, so did Norwalk. I can get you the map of all the locations. I don't have it with me. So GBT in your area has one in Trumbull, but not in Fairfield. And like East Windsor has a program as well. So they're scattered. I think Milford has theirs as well. In southeastern Connecticut, we're funding one. So I'll get you the map of them.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah, I think the GBT has been putting the word out about that Trumbull program, so it's great to see. In terms of buses, generally speaking, when you're talking about buses, you're talking about CT transit, and we obviously have regional transit, at least as you have answered today. We are looking at how we're being funded in terms of with respect to CT transit. And I know there's been some conversation about Greater Bridgeport Transit, so I'm being a little parochial here in terms of just making sure that we are getting the funding we need to be able to run those fixed routes in the area. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I'm not aware of any concerns brought by any of the transit districts to us. We generally fund their current services requests. So they tell us what they need to provide the services, and then we pass it along to the governor, to OPM, and then that is incorporated into what is our current services request that comes to you in the legislature. And so we don't not fund anything at the local level. I mean, unlike other parts of the country where county governments or local governments pay a lot more for transit service, in Connecticut, it's the federal government and state government pay the 95% of the cost of transit service at the local level. And so we continue to support that. And so we've actually supported expansions in the past biennial budget. There was a significant expansion $20 million expansion in fixed route service in multiple transit districts across the state. So when we talk transit, we don't talk just CT Transit anymore. We view all bus service as part of the state effort.
Thank you, and I stand corrected. I did not mean to imply that you don't
Nope.
think about all of us.
But if there is a concern on the GBT side, please let us know and we'll talk to them.
Great, thank you. I will follow up with you offline about that. Next is rail. When I first joined this committee, it's a topic that we talked about on a very regular basis, and at home was talking about it on a daily basis with a commuting spouse to New York. And I know the good representative from down in Fairfield County also spoke to this earlier, but specifically I wanted to talk to you about the proposed fare increases and the balance between fares and keeping people on the train and off, one of the most congested parts of the highway, or actually, I think we've now been named the Stamford Region 95 as the most congested highway. So it's always a balance in terms of making sure we have the funding we need to run the rail, but making sure we keep people on the train. And can you speak to that both in terms of ridership and the impact, but also in terms of funding long-term with the Special Transportation Fund?
Yeah, so Stanford was the busiest section. I think some portions of California still are the most congested, but we do have that badge of honor. Yeah, I mean on the rail side, historically, MTA Metro North has done a 4% fare increase every couple of years. Kind of took a pause during COVID, and reinstituted that, and now they're planning to do that again. But costs have increased significantly to run the rail service. Labor costs have gone up. We saw inflationary pressures everywhere in our economy, and everyone talked about that for an entire election cycle, nationally, and it impacted our construction industry as well. So the cost to maintain the infrastructure comes out of our rail appropriation budget. The cost to run the service comes out of our rail appropriation budget. So as costs continue to increase, we are faced with just a few options. Do we cut service? Do we raise fares? Or do you increase the subsidy the state is providing to provide that service? And so, it's an unenviable position. Like none of them are great options. But the elasticity, an increase of 5% on the fare, we believe, MTA believes, is not going to deter individuals from using that service as long as we continue to provide the same reliable service. They had a 98% on-time performance percentage, the highest ever in Metro North's history. And so it's the best in the nation. So people know if they get on the train, they're probably going to arrive on time to where they need to go, which is what you want in public transportation. OPM, the governor, the legislature are faced with a spending cap. The constitutional spending cap applies to the STF as well. So all of our spending, which is the subsidy to provide bus and rail service in our state, falls under that spending cap. And so, that's the position we're in is what do you cut in the budget if you aren't going to increase fares, or do you cut service? Because the only other things that are paid out of the STF appropriation are the staff at DOT, the staff at DMV, and our salt supplies, and then bus and rail service and debt service for our bonding. So those are the only line items we really have.
Thank you, and I promise not to go any deeper into the Special Transportation Fund, Madam Chair, but maybe in an offline conversation. And I appreciate the use of the word unenviable position. And it's difficult because one way or another, either as taxpayers we will pay or as users. And of course, users, no one ever wants to see the fares go up, but I appreciate you sharing what you did. And the last question is about phlebotomy and impaired driving. And this is a conversation you've had many times with many of us. In terms of impaired driving, we're seeing multi-substances, certainly wearing my public health chair hat. We're interested in prevention, and I know you're working with our local prevention councils, who we need to make sure we adequately fund as well. But the phlebotomy work, can you talk a little bit more about how that might work, where that might live? DREs, you have people going to training, you're trying to kind of spread the load and have those who are in communities that have DREs go elsewhere? How will it work with the phlebotomy?
Yeah, so the phlebotomy is a little bit different than DREs. The DREs are trained to identify impairment and what you're impaired by. The phlebotomy program came out of actually the cannabis legalization bill directed the creation of a task force to look at how to determine whether drugs are in someone's system. Because urine was the traditional use, but that's waste, right? That is after the fact. That's not what's in your system at that point. And just because something is in your system, it doesn't mean you're impaired by it. But it's oral fluids, swabbing your mouth, or blood is much more timely. It's showing what is most recent. And so the task force recommended start to train local law enforcement to have the ability to do blood draws after extensive training. So as you know, as public health chair, phlebotomists are not licensed in Connecticut. But we are doing the training for law enforcement through Hartford Healthcare. So the same training that any other phlebotomist in the state takes is what these law enforcement professionals take. They do 100 different successful blood draws, and then they're able to do it in the field. And it's really intended for if they cannot get the individual to a hospital or to some other place to have that other healthcare professional do the blood draw. They only have a narrow window of time where they can get this evidence, collect this evidence. And so having that tool available to use if they need to is something that local law enforcement has asked us for. And it's a national best practice. Many other states already do this.
Madam Chair, if I may, with one quick follow-up. And the follow-up question is, the state is paying for the DRE training for officers. Will the state, and is the state paying also for the phlebotomist training?
Yes, so we use our federal funds to do the DRE training as well as the phlebotomy training.
Commissioner, thank you very much for all of your work and for your answers to my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. And I will note that while not all DREs are phlebotomists and vice versa, we do have DREs that have gone through the phlebotomy program. I know there's 2 on the Guilford police force and probably several others. And I suspect we will be learning more about this at an upcoming public hearing next week, as a matter of fact, as well as discussing the STF at length, I suspect. So next we have Rep. Baumgartner, followed by the good ranking Senate member, Senator Wong.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's so great to see you, Commissioner. Very much would like to align myself with the great remarks so many of my colleagues have made, showering you with effusive praises. Dare I say, one up my good friend, Representative Bronco, and stating you just simply had me at hello. But but it But in all seriousness, thank you so much, you and your entire team, the folks who are hard at work day in and day out, ensuring that our roads are cleared so we can drive to and from our homes safely to show up for our work, especially during these crazy sessions. So your agency's the best. We so appreciate you. Questions, I'll start with the cost sharing program for bridge replacement. I think your agency has been completely exemplary in that department in terms of communicating with our local municipalities, our municipal CEOs, and our councils, identifying ways that they can make the replacement of really important bridges that may not be may not qualify for federal funding because it's not on a state road, for example. It's been a huge help, and I want to thank your team for helping facilitate a lot of those bridge replacements for some key bridges that are aging, almost reaching are far beyond their life expectancy. And to replace those bridges, obviously, the jobs, that will bring jobs as a result of it, and more importantly, replace aging infrastructure and making that infrastructure more safe for our communities to use. So can you speak to that program and also speak to some funding issues that may result as a result of some of the potential federal funding reductions for transportation projects?
Yeah, so the local bridge program, there's, as you mentioned, there's two different ones. There's a federal local bridge program and a state local bridge. Um, we have the state local bridge program is statutory. We've been gracious to continue to receive support from the legislature and funding for that. So we have been able to continue to support local governments. I think several years ago, we increased it to a 50-50 split for the state local program, right, Jim? Yeah, okay. Because it was lower than 50-50 before that. And now the federal local bridge program, that has seen increased funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law. They have a dedicated formula program just for bridges, which the country has never had before, which is great. So we're able to funnel a lot more of that money directly to local governments to address local bridges that are federally eligible. So it's not just whether it's on a state road or not, there's certain definitions of what's a bridge and what's not a bridge. And so our team is able to work with the local governments to determine, is this bridge eligible? Is this not? Which program does it fit under? So for now, we are confident that that federally funded formula program will continue. And so we'll be able to continue to support local governments on the federal side.
Thank you. Now we'll take a detour from our local roads, get onto our highways. Wearing my tree hugger hat for a second. In Environment Committee this year, not deliberating on any bill with respect to tree clearing of our highways. I know we all have constituents that have expressed concerns over the last couple of years about sort of mass tree removal along our roadways. One concern I have, and a couple constituents have approached me on, is when some of these trees are cleared out, some of the issues of invasive trees in particular, like the tree of heaven or other invasive species, really beginning to proliferate after kind of a whole swath of more native trees or older trees have been taken out. So my question is the DOT doing anything in particular to address some of the issues with respect to invasive trees and invasive plants and trees management?
Kim or Paul, which one of you wants to come talk about invasives? So I will say, so we are very dedicated to this program because if we're talking about getting to Vision Zero, we need to ensure that everyone makes it home alive. And we see too many people being killed and seriously injured by tree limbs or trees themselves falling on cars, or people who are deviating off the roadway, crashing into a tree and dying. And our dedicated men and women who serve in the DOT are often some of the first to get onto the scene and see the carnage that is caused by that. But we did release, the legislature directed us to do a vegetation management guidelines, which we published last year, significantly updated, and which we transmitted to legislature. But I'll let Kim talk about invasives. Can you introduce yourself?
Most certainly. Thank you for that question. Kim Lassay, Bureau Chief of Policy and Planning. And I could talk about invasive species probably for a few hours, but just to talk about how they're on the side of our roads, right? Of course, they are very prolific on the side of our roads, and it's a great environment for them, unfortunately, right? They're a lot better at growing in these harsh environments, and so therefore they do tend to take over. Both of our bureaus are working together. It would be great if both Paul and I could have both of our brains up here, but we are working on what we can do with these areas after they're cleared. One of the things that we're working on is looking at turning those areas into pollinator areas if indeed they are getting enough sunlight. Paul's team in the Bureau of Highway Operations does have a spraying program. My understanding is that's fairly limited as far as the amount of funding that we have to work with. So understanding that there's many invasives on the side of the road that could use treatment, we tend to focus on the ones that are the most invasive, things like mile-a-minute vine, things that are really, really detrimental to the environment. They all are, but there are kind of different degrees of criminality amongst invasives, if you would. So that is something that we are working on, but it is something that we're a little bit limited in the tools that we have in our toolbox right now.
Thank you for that very comprehensive response. And for my last question, we may need our friend, Mr. Zimmer, to come up. This is with respect to rail. It may have been addressed already by the good chair who has been from day one since arriving in this building, has been an incredible advocate for Shoreline East. We've spent a lot of time obviously talking about restoring funding, and it's so great to see that there has been an uptick in ridership. And I hope that's a sign for greater things to come. My question to you is specific to extension, kind of where that stands with DOT at this time.
Yeah, so we did prepare that report that we were mandated to do. Looked at the Eastern Connecticut transportation study and possible extension. Right now, we don't have any plans to pursue extension for a couple reasons. One is lack of funding. As evidenced by budget, we are seeking funding to maintain current services, including the additional trains that the ARPA funding provided on Shoreline East. Those are provided in the current services request to the legislature, but expansions are not in the budget request at this point. The other difficulty that was identified in the study was the difficulty in getting slots to be able to go over the bridge to go east of New London. And part of the reason is that it is a movable bridge, so you'd have to get approval from, you'd have to get permits essentially to go to have fewer openings of the bridge, essentially. So Coast Guard approval, DEEP approval, and that's one of the main hurdles. The additional is the existing station's station in Mystic is not conducive to serving the M8s, the electric sets we're using on Shoreline, because it would be essentially, it doesn't have high level boarding, so it wouldn't be ADA accessible. So those are the two main reasons right now why it's not, three main reasons why it's not being pursued.
Well, I very much appreciate your response on all of those questions. Thank you again. And with that, thank you both, Madam Chairs, for your indulgence.
Thank you. And I suspect there'll be a hearing on that as well, maybe next week, as a matter of fact. Senator Wong, followed by Representative Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and great to see you, Commissioner. And I want to thank you for your leadership, and I want to thank your staff for always being readily available and being a resource to questions and concerns that we have. And want to give a shout out to your field crews who are always out there. They don't get enough credit, and I think it was one of the major accomplishments for us to be able to protect them via speed cameras. And also, people forget we had some snowfalls. And the roads were clear. So no complaints means they've done a great job. So I want to give kudos to you and your staff, an extension. Now, I really want to take a moment. I know a lot of the issues have been raised, and we're going to have public hearings. And being on the ranking, along with the leadership, we're privy to a lot of this information. But I appreciate you giving time to the committee members. I really want to thank you for the good points. And I appreciate your slide at the end to say, great accomplishments. You only hear complaints, but what you did in regards to the Fairfield Avenue Bridge in Norwalk, what you did in being able to put 2 bridges over the Saugatuck Bridge in Westport in the course of 3 weekends is an engineering miracle. But for me, I saw firsthand what you all did post the August flood. The roads upon Oxford and Southbury and Newtown, which we represent, along 34, right along the Tomlinson Dam, the devastation was stunning. And for your crew and engineering to be able to accomplish what you did, to be able to put temporary roads to facilitate major commerce and transportation is beyond remarkable. Now, I've just pointed out 3 engineering feats that were remarkable, not only in its safety and efficiency, but timing. So my question to you is, and this has been asked by constituents, if they can do all of that, put 2 bridges in 3 weekends and fix a bridge that's been burnt down to its foundation and make temporary roads to facilitate the damage that I saw firsthand, why do we take so long to complete necessary transportation infrastructures? And I'll give you some in. Is it permitting? I know you put forth a bill addressing that issue. Is it a focused sense of urgency in these projects, or is it about prioritizing these projects? Because when you put next to those incredible accomplishments and the struggle that we have. And I'll say this, for me driving up from Fairfield, the Merritt Parkway, that was a tiger project back in 20, I don't even remember. It's been over 15, 20 years, and it's still an ongoing project. So could you educate me on that kind of disparity in regards to delivering transportation, much needed transportation change?
Yeah, so I'll start with like the bridge rolls. Those, to the public appear like, wow, it was quick, right? Over the course of a weekend, you roll a bridge in, you tear it down and roll a bridge in. And what they don't see is all the work that leads up to that. So years of design and permitting to get to the point where you can roll a bridge in. And I think many people in the construction industry would prefer to do that because you avoid having to work in traffic. The most dangerous thing you can do is work alongside traffic. If you can shut the road down and roll a bridge in, it's much safer for the people working to build the infrastructure. But oftentimes, state DOTs avoid it in many cases because of the impact to the traveling public. We've been doing more of those. We started several years ago with one, and we've been doing more and more. And I've encouraged the team to any place we can do those quick rolls. Let's do it. But it's not going to work everywhere. But there's a lot of work that leads up to that. It just, from the outside, it looks quick. The other piece is the emergency situations. Those are of having to skip over all the work that starts. You don't have to do any of the permitting. And permitting is a huge holdup to delivery of infrastructure in this country of all forms, not just transportation. So, all of us state DOTs across the country continue to bring up this as a problem, that we need to eliminate redundant reviews and get to the point where the previous Trump administration had a concept of one federal decision. Go to one federal agency and get approval, and you can proceed. It never came to fruition. I'm hopeful that under the next 4 years, we may see some improvements to the permitting process, but that is usually the big holdup. And then on the response to the flooding, many of those are temporary bridges, which we can do in many cases. But then we will have to come in and do a permanent bridge. And so what they're not seeing is, since those temporary bridges have gone in, which we had to design and quickly get them in, but our bridge engineers are designing the permanent project now and having to go through the whole permit process, working with the federal, the EPA, the Army Corps, Fish and Wildlife Service, everyone to get the permits to allow us to do the permanent replacements, which is frustrating. There was a bridge there before. Why not just let us build it?
Well, Commissioner, I cited your leadership, but I also cited your courage, because you've proposed a number of bills that have created and caused ire and consternation. I remember the permitting bill in which the environmental advocates were extremely concerned, and my hope is that there is a balancing act, because we are at a crisis mode in regards to traffic safety. Beyond your leadership on the areas of traffic safety as it relates to impairment, distracted driving, and the reckless speeds that we have, it's also our roadways and the congestion that occurs. But I know we're going to have hearings on that, and I respect we've had a long time. The other question I had is, this committee, in a bipartisan effort, approved the Vision Zero work. And it was remarkable to me it took that long, but with the fatalities that we've had on our roads, it was truly a call to action. Now, I know we've implemented some aspects of it in regards to protecting local input with the speed and red light cameras. We looked at the work zone. But talk to me a little bit about municipalities that want to continue the other recommendations of Vision Zero, with the goal of obviously preventing any aspect of fatality or injury to pedestrians, walkers, and bikers and automobiles. But it's a lot of money for our municipalities to implement a master plan. Roads need to be reconstructed. That comes and works with you. Speed zones need to be rededicated. So we have a plan, Vision Zero. The legislature has approved it. Where's the funding and the support to be able to empower our municipal leaders to be able to implement that. And when they want to implement that, it's going to be millions of dollars in a very tight municipal budget season that's coming up, and unpredictability of federal and state funding to our municipalities. What do you say to that? And is there a means to achieve those Vision Zero goals, notable and important? But where's the funding coming from? And is there a pool reserved in the governor's budget?
Yeah, so we do have through the support of the legislature over the years, the community connectivity grant program really is one of those municipal grant programs where municipalities on safety projects can come to the department and seek funding. And any of those that have done that safety plan have a leg up in their applications. The other portion is the lot SIP program, which is a municipal grant program pushed through the COGS, heavily targeted at roadway safety projects in local communities. And then the final one is federal funding. So the federal infrastructure bill had a big portion, Safe Streets and Roads for All. Many municipalities in Connecticut have applied and received funding for that. To implement, they had to have a safety plan in place in order to receive funding for construction. So many of them went and got the funding to do the plan, and now they're receiving funding to do those implementation efforts. So we continue to support those. And if it's a state roadway, they can either pursue those grants or they can work with the COGS and with us to identify a need for a road safety audit. Or both on a state road and a local road, and that can help them identify what the needs may be. Because what we've seen to be most successful is when a municipality has a plan of what are the problems and what do they want to achieve, and then bring that plan forward and begin to just go down the list of get funding for this, get funding for that. I think New Britain is probably the most successful. They've completely transformed their municipal street network by having a 5 and 10-year plan of attack of what projects they want to achieve to improve safety. And they just kept going after state funds, federal funds to get it done.
Well, I appreciate hearing that, and I'd be eager to learn about New Britain's. But I've also seen successes in my district towns of Fairfield, and also Bethel. Bethel, with a recent federal grant, was able to develop a walkway with traffic coordination, traffic light coordination. But that seemingly small project, critically important for public safety, cost over $2 million. So my point is, the vision is important, and the implementation is critical, but it's a lot of money. And are we looking for municipalities to do an 80-20 match, or are we looking at the federal, state, and local entities to kind of shoulder the burden? Is there a particular formula? Because I'd like to understand that a little bit more, because we want to get to roadway safety and Vision Zero, but it's a lot of money for our municipalities with very tight budgets.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's also a lot of money for us with a very tight budget too. As I pointed out, some of those mega projects are going to cost in excess of $5 to $6 billion, and so it's always a balancing act. So in terms of the proportional share, connectivity grant does not have specific matching requirements. The federal ones generally are 80-20, 80% federal, 20% local. And the lot SIP project as well is generally all federally funded with a very minimal portion of match. And oftentimes, a lot of those others, the match is provided by us at the state level.
Well, I appreciate that, and we'll get into more details and projects, but in my support of Vision Zero, it was important that we implement it to save lives. And I want to thank the chair for the indulgence. We'll look forward to speaking more about that, but I know that wasn't part of the array of transportation-related bills that will have a public hearing, and I wanted to get your perspective on it as we move forward. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Next, we have Rep. Hall, and dare I say, closing us out will be Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good to see you, Commissioner. Excellent presentation. So totally impressed with that. and would request, it sounds like we're going to all get a copy of it because would love to share it with the constituents in my district. One particular ask on the rail side of the slide, I know you gave all the communities, if you could include like a timeline, if you will, on those projects. I know, expect to have groundbreaking this year in Enfield. We've been in the design phase for, as you know, quite a few years now. So I think it would be really helpful if we could just have like a timeline associated with all those projects, just to give people an idea of how they're kind of progressing through the pipeline, if you will. And I know you've had a ton of cheerleading for the Hartford line. And it's interesting because if you look back over the course of history, in the late 90s, early 2000s, we made a pitch over and over for that Hartford line. So it kind of is nice to see it all kind of come together beautifully, and that it really was a worthy argument to make all these quarter century, to get it where it is today. So thank you for that. And I think that was my only ask. I think a lot of the questions have been answered. And your staff, your liaison staff has been really wonderful to work with, especially with all the issues we've had, in particular with the freight line that you're well aware of. We are working with our COGS coming up to actually get a meeting together to look at funding for the rail line, but more importantly, the trail that the two towns, East Windsor and Enfield, are really looking to do. So the COGS are working with us on that. We're going to have a meeting at the end of March. Would love to have somebody from your staff there if they're interested. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing the presentation, and good to see you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, I've been on this committee. This is the second term. I dare say that of all the departments and agencies of the state of Connecticut, yours is the most conspicuous. You're the one that a lot of people see the orange trucks and see more of the staff. And consistently, my experience with your department has been one of great appreciation and great efficiency and service to the community. A year or so ago, you were graciously extended an invitation for an open house at your main facility in Newington. And I went up with the expectation, I said, where is it? Well, it's up, the Berlin Turnpike. You see it's a big building. I said, how big can it be? It's the DOT. I figured it'd be a couple of Quonset huts and some guys smoking cigarettes. And I show up and it's this edifice. I mean, it's bigger than this place. And I was very impressed by a lot of things there, particularly your control center, and the staff there was unfailingly helpful and were very knowledgeable about their various functions there. My legislative liaison is Mary Ann Daly, and Mary Ann Daly I talk to a lot of state departments. It's the only place I call where she picks up the phone. Usually when I call somebody, if they got caller ID, I'm not going to have them pick up the phone. But the DOT is one that does that. So we went and they had a beautiful setup. There were refreshments. It was great. One thing that impressed me the most, or I didn't expect it to, is this rotary single lane exchange or roundabouts. And you have a project about roundabouts. I got a pamphlet, and whoever the gentleman was, it's heading that up, was very enthusiastic about it and cited a lot of data concerning safety, fuel efficiency, a number of different things, less imposition on the landscape and the area. I wondered if you could give me some update on that. My experience with roundabouts, there's very few of them in the state of Connecticut. One's down in Milford, West Haven. I go through them when you're up in the Poughkeepsie area of New York. You go like 50 yards and you're on another rotary. I drove in Ireland one time and I thought I was going to be killed because everything's rotaries. You just keep spinning, and you're on the wrong side of the street to begin with, and these lorries are coming the other way. But I realize not only are they very quaint, and you can put plantings in there and so forth. And the gentleman that explained it to me said we're working on it, but maybe in the legislature we see this as a real positive. Can you tell me where the roundabout project is at DOT these days?
Yeah, so our team that has been working on this is really passionate about it because it has so many benefits for air quality, as well as reducing serious injuries and serious crashes, major reduction in crashes. So we are continuing progressing it throughout the state. Each year, we're putting more into design, and it is a large education effort. Communities may be a little nervous at first. But once they are shown the information about what the benefit is to their community, people generally get on board. So each year we add more into the program. We've looked at the intersections across the state and are identifying projects that could be deployed and converted to a roundabout. It doesn't work everywhere because it does take up a little bit more space than a normal four-way stop-controlled intersection, but where it can fit, it's a huge benefit to the community. So there's a saying in the transportation community, when in doubt, roundabout, because it's usually the best option.
Thank you very much, Ed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Well, we are at the 2.5 hour mark for an oversight hearing, and you've gotten participation from more than half of the committee. And I think you've been around long enough, both on the legislative side of things and the executive branch side, to know that it is not always common to have such praise, bicameral, bipartisan support for the agency. And I hope you feel that, and I hope you're very proud of that, because your work has been outstanding. Your team is outstanding. And, as we move forward, I know that we will continue having a good cooperative relationship. So I know I appreciate that. I think you heard from so many members today the support for your agency. So thank you for all you do, and thanks for being with us today.
Yes, thank you. I have a all staff meeting tomorrow. Yeah. We do a virtual all staff meeting with everyone in the department. I will definitely convey that. We have the best team. The men and women who make up the agency are fantastic. And I think you've seen that in 2024 with the emergency response. And as Representative Smith said, they are one of the most conspicuous state employees. And I tell them that when I go visit them in the garages, that they give state employees a good name, and they make us all look good. So thank you.
I think perhaps like a video montage of all the CTN clips of every legislator saying how wonderful you are would be fantastic for the staff meeting and for morale. But again, thank you. Thank you for your time today. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you next week at the public hearing. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Just a reminder that we have another informational hearing with the Connecticut Public Transportation Council coming up at 4 p.m. in this room. Is that correct, Cameron? Yes. See you all very shortly.